Also, what I really love about these majestic trees is they're also an acknowledgement of the ancestors and the history and the past. And that in honoring their wisdom, we're also tuning to our ancestral bloodlines and the ancestral wisdom embedded in the trees. And they really believe with this particular tree, particularly in Egypt, that wisdom teachings were passed generation to generation at this home place, in these home places. So there's a lineage passing related to this tree. And this is the first time that we really see that. What does it mean for a wisdom being of a standing one to be the home place for the passing of lineage from generation to generation? It's really beautiful. Usually when we think about lineage passing, we think of it in the context of humans passing to humans. And in this one, we're bringing the tree of acacia into our human family as the one that passes the lineage. Now, one of these ideas with the acacia is that the acacia rose from the sacred mound. In ancient Egypt and Kemet, they have this story of two family members, Nut, which is the sky, and Geb, which is the primordial mound of creation. And oftentimes some of the temples, they reference the primordial mound made of like soil and water and reeds and lotuses. And that from this primordial mound named Geb, the tree of life rose. And so again, we have this relationship with the water and the light. Now, again, as always, they believe that the acacia tree reached out into the sky and also in this particular context supported the root system of the stars and the planets. Like they saw the stars as roots of another world. And they believe that the acacia tree was what helped keep the stars up and then also helped keep the planets in rotation and in movement with their branches, so that when the root systems went into the underworld, they also were keeping a strong foundation for the acacia tree to hold up the entire cosmos, which is really also really beautiful. They also believe that this particular tree, again, was the center of the entire universe, and that there were 4 river sources that really traveled from it and came to it and emerged from it. And that this tree was the central cardinal point compass of the entire planet. And when the 4 rivers went into the 4 directions, that those 4 rivers were nourishing and feeding the network of all of the other world trees too. So there was a really interesting idea around the acacia being the compass of other trees. And what's really interesting about that is Egypt, in terms of the Great Pyramid and sacred sites, have this idea too, that the Great Pyramid is the compass for the sacred sites. A lot of the feeding happened to all of the other trees and sacred sites. Now, similarly, this tree symbolized immortality, and particularly the acacia sprigs. The acacia sprigs themselves were the part of the teachings of resurrection and immortality of the soul. And we're going to see this a little bit later. And when an acacia tree was really green and well nourished, it reflected the human spirit. And it reflected this part of ourselves, being that it was called the evergreen, this part of our human spirit that never dies, that just continues forward. We're evergreen, we're ever emerald green. Now, one of the things that's really, really, really beautiful, again, is that there's a relationship with life, death, rebirth, immortality, and protection related to the acacia. And we've seen this in some of the other world tree myths where they were called guardians and protectors. And in this context, the acacia is the protector of the journey of the souls coming in and going home and becoming a part of immortal existence. And in that way, the wisdom embedded in the acacia tree helped the soul travel. And we're going to see how that happened too. This tree is also a very resilient tree and also endures all different kinds of really intense weather. So the relationship with this tree was strengthened and fortified our ability to withstand the changing times, and withstand the ebbs and flows of life. So it's a strengthening and fortifying wisdom tree. Similar to what we saw with Buddha in the Taoist tradition, this tree represented enlightenment. We received enlightening ideas, enlightening consciousness. And then it was a tree that represented liberation, because working with it in a medicinal process helped to liberate any programs that were not helpful in the mind, liberate any ancestral dynamics that were handed down from the past, liberate any perspectives that weren't useful for creating more harmony in the cosmos and in the terrestrial realm. This tree also, because of that, represented prosperity. It was like a tree of prosperous consciousness. When we worked with the medicines of the tree to liberate things that are not helpful, or liberate any ceilings in our growth or in our, prosperous consciousness, when we liberated all of that, we entered into field of prosperous consciousness. And so in this way, this tree assisted to allow what needed to die, so new life emerged with new octaves. A lot of really unseen, invisible societies that care for the mystery teachings and that are protectors of the mystery teachings really have a strong relationship with this particular tree, because this particular tree was referenced as the carrier of the mystery teachings and traditions of what has lasted through the ages. And in this way, it is a tree of wisdom. I'll just pass this to you, Timo, to talk about the Aboriginal culture in relationship to the acacia tree.
In regards to the acacia, I would also say that there's like an ethereal quality to the tree, at least in my relationship to it. There's something, I think, very symbolic about the environment in which it inhabits. It's in this kind of open canopy forest, these savannas. And we'll drop into that in a little bit when we discuss the Sahel region. And this is kind of the distribution you can see of it around the world. And so within this ethereal quality, you'll see that there's some cultures that have taken that even further within their religio-cultural kind of worldview. And when we drop into Australia, there's this concept of the dream time. And the dream time is a way of just expressing their stories, their narratives, their creation myths. It's not just religio-cultural, but it's also just a full compendium of their belief system and relationship to nature. And so according to the Aboriginal lore, and when we say Aboriginal, we're also making a big swath over multiple tribal groups in Australia. But within the lore, the acacia tree, also known as the wattle in Australia, wattle referring to, fencing or creating these wattles from it because it is thorny, so it can be used as, this kind of barrier and protection in these open areas. It represents knowledge and wisdom and this connection to the ancestral spirits. And that's something that really resonates with me because there is something very ancestral about it. And one of the main things about the dream time is storytelling. And so when it comes to the acacia, this is the tree that you would sit under in the shade and tell stories. And so there's this concept of storytelling within the acacia, not just in Australia, but in areas of Africa as well. We're sitting under the shade of this tree in this open kind of canopy savanna in the heat of the day and telling stories. And these stories are these myths and these kinds of parables of life. And so the acacia almost inhabits that. So it also provides guidance in this way and insight into the life journey. So the symbolism reflects this deep connection between nature and the spirituality of the Aboriginal culture, but it's also the symbol. And here you can see one of the beautiful paintings that's done within these kind of visualizations of the dream time, which has this very, very transcendental imagery. And so another thing around its symbolism and its view is its stature as nature's sentinel. And it stands tall and proud in the vast landscape and inhabits. Its appearance is very striking with its twisted trunk and branches over this landscape. And it looks like this umbrella. And, that umbrella has a protective nature to create this refuge for you to sit under the scorching sun and to sip tea or to pray or to tell stories. And so the leaves themselves, which are very beautiful, it's if you've ever seen one up close, they have these little leaflets on this compound leaf structure, and they're feathery, and so within the classification of how we identify leaflets and leaf structures, this would be a bipinnate, and pinna referring to the feathers of a bird. And so this feathery structure also implies that it can capture humidity. And there's going to be all of this kind of evapotranspiration happening in these environments at night when the dew comes up and these trees can capture it in these feathery feathers of the leaves. And so it also produces these very fragrant flowers, and the acacia flowers being white, yellow, or even red, depending on the species. And these also add this like abundant color display in these extreme climates.